The following episode contains subject matter related to physical and emotional abuse that may be triggering. Listener discretion is advised. The first time Dominique Moceanu told anyone about her Olympic dream, she was 9 years old and living in Tampa, Florida.
My dad reached out to the local news station and said, "Hey, I've got a daughter who's a gymnast." And before I knew it, the local news came to our gym and they were doing a special feature on 96 Olympic hopefuls.
She's a gymnast with extraordinary talent and a dream that began even before she was born, in the heart of her father, amid the communism of Romania.
It was her first TV interview.
And so I didn't know at first, like, how should I be? How should I act? I was a little nervous, but then it was just me. I was kind of goofy. I had a Romanian bowl cut. I was about 50 pounds and very talented.
My goal is to reach the 96 Olympics.
How come?
Because I want to get a lot of medals and want to be on TV a lot.
That was the very first time I said it out loud and not just kind of the secret petitions of my heart.
Dominique's childhood revolved around gymnastics, and as she got older, her training schedule got tougher. She missed her freshman year of high school, spending much of it at the Caroli Ranch in Texas with coaches Bella and Marta Caroli. The Carolis have come under fire in recent years. Gymnasts say that the toxic culture at the ranch opened the door for Larry Nassar, the former team doctor. Nassar has been accused of sexually abusing more than 500 women and girls, many of them gymnasts. He's serving a minimum of 100 years in prison. Dominique wouldn't learn about Nassar's crimes until 20 years after the 96 Olympics. In the months leading up to those games, Dominique and Carrie Strug were the only athletes training at the ranch.
There were times where it was pretty awful, and Carrie and I would just literally be in the bunk beds dreaming what we were going to eat after the Olympics because we were always so hungry and we just felt deprived oftentimes.
I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Dominique describes some of what she endured at the Caroli Ranch as mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive.
And we knew it was a sacrifice for a period of time, but I think there's a healthier way and a balance to be able to achieve the same goals.
When the games rolled around, expectations were high. Nancy Armour was covering gymnastics for the Associated Press.
There was an incredible excitement around Dominique Moceanu. She was this cute, young, little gymnast who reminded people of Nadia.
Nadia Comaneci was the first gymnast to score a perfect 10. And like Dominique, Nadia is Romanian.
She had the same dark hair, the dark eyes, and she was incredibly talented. And she also was coached by Bella Caroli. So there were all of these parallels between Nadia and Dominique. And so that added another element to a U.S. team that already was incredibly successful, that had Shannon Miller, that had Carrie Strug and Amanda Borden and Dominique Dawes.
In all, the team had 7 members. They'd become known as the Magnificent Seven, and they'd be celebrities from their first moments in Atlanta. The spotlight was firmly focused on the U.S. women, and some of them would find its glare more comfortable than others. From Dear Media and Together, I'm Michelle Kwan. This is Summer of Gold. This is episode 4, The Vault. In 1994, Outkast released their debut album and introduced the world to Atlanta hip-hop.
Southern playalistic Cadillac music, is that right?
But while the album's title caused some confusion, its mission did not.
You know what I'm saying? We're really trying to come out of Atlanta doing something positive, representing where we live.
2 years later, Olympic organizers tried to ride that trend with a hip-hop-inspired opening ceremony song. Yeah, that doesn't sound very much like hip-hop to me either. The opening ceremonies are one of the highlights of the games, and Atlanta was no exception.
It was impossible to get tickets, but the USOC had a lottery.
The prize was 2 tickets for friends and family. Every member of Team USA was entered. Softball player Michelle Smith was one of the lucky winners.
And I didn't find out till a couple days earlier, so I called my sisters. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have these 2 tickets to the opening ceremonies. And they were living in North Carolina at the time. And they're like, we're all in. So they drove through the night to Atlanta to be there.
On TV, it's a 4-hour event. But for athletes, it takes much longer.
The fun part was just getting dressed. We got our hair done.
That's basketball player Dawn Staley. This was her first of 6 Olympics. She's been to 3 as an athlete and 3 as a coach.
I think we had blue skirts, white shirt, red blazers, and, we had hats. I thought we looked sharp.
The athletes gathered in the old Atlanta Braves ballpark until it was time to walk down the block and into the Olympic Stadium.
There's a long, 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 long wait.
The Parade of Nations begins with Greece. Then countries enter the stadium alphabetically. The host country enters last. It is a long, 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 long wait.
Like there were countries there that I didn't even know existed.
Cheryl Swoops watched the delegations line up, and she started to get nervous.
My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty. Yeah, I was nervous. Not about opening ceremonies, but for me, that's when it became real, right? Opening ceremonies, like after tonight, it's time to get down to business.
Finally, Team USA was told to line up and wait some more.
You're paused and you're waiting in this old regime about to cross over into the new one and explode onto the scene.
We had to run like up this ramp to come down this ramp into the arena.
My first thought as I looked down was, Dot, don't trip.
It was absolute chaos. Everyone was like, yeah! We came running in.
Oh my gosh. Goosebumps for days.
Everything just erupted. It was like, rah!
USA, right?
The first 2 people I saw were like Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, who were on like the sideline of the track. I think I high-fived Bruce Willis.
It was amazing. Just the noise, everybody's cheering, and we see all these USA flags, and my heart is racing.
I just remember thinking, my sisters are out there somewhere. My sisters are out there somewhere. And it was like, I feel like I'm a 20-year-old again talking about this.
And as we get now to the infield, all of us there together, every country, every athlete throughout the world.
That's softball's Dot Richardson.
There on a huge screen came Martin Luther King's speech.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia.
I'm getting chills even now. I promise you, you could hear a pin drop.
Swimmer Janet Evans handed the torch to former Olympic boxer Muhammad Ali, and Celine Dion sang The Power of the Dream.
Deep within each heart, there lies a magic spark.
But the Magnificent Seven wasn't there. They were half an hour away, staying in a former fraternity house on the campus of Emory University.
We don't get to walk in the opening ceremonies.
That's gymnast Shannon Miller. This was her second Olympics. She'd already won 5 medals in Barcelona.
Getting to the ceremonies, getting all the athletes on buses and over there, and then standing in the heat for hours, and then getting back, rolling in at 2, 3 a.m. We need to get to bed, get rested up for the competition.
But Dominique Moceanu still wishes she could have been there. At 14, she was the youngest member of the team.
I always felt like, man, we had earned that. You think we're not conditioned enough to stand on our feet for 4 or 5 hours? That's not a problem. I'll tell you right now, just not a problem.
The gymnasts gathered in the living room to watch the opening ceremonies on TV.
I probably went to bed before lights out. I guarantee you I was the first one to bed because I needed the sleep.
When the coaches sent the rest of the team to bed, Dominique went to her room, but she didn't go to sleep.
I remember turning the TV on. It was dark. We were supposed to have lights out.
Dominique climbed into bed and pretended to go to sleep, but she kept the TV on.
Bella's feet come by my door to see if I'm up. He's knocking. He didn't hear anything, but I see his feet from the hallway light.
Bella Caroli wasn't the kind of coach who would look the other way when his athletes broke the rules. Lights out meant lights out.
And then I closed my eyes. All of a sudden, I was scared. I did not want him to see me awake. And then he comes into the room. And I was terrified. I was like, don't move. Don't just pretend you're asleep. He walks all the way over to me, looks over. I can feel his presence. And then he walks away.
After that, Dominique decided it was time to go to sleep for real. But she was still worried that she was in trouble.
I never addressed it. I never asked. I just went into practice the next day as if nothing had happened.
But soon, Dominique and the Magnificent Seven would be at the center of a much bigger story. It was an event everybody would remember, long after they forgot the words to that Celine Dion song. Nancy Armour has covered 13 Olympic Games in a row. 1996 was her first.
When I found out that I was going to be going, I was ecstatic. I was excited. I was nervous. And I would have covered handball. I would have covered anything because I wanted to go to an Olympics so badly. And I was fortunate enough to be put on the gymnastics beat.
The U.S. women had never won a team title at the World Championships or the Olympics. But there were big expectations for the team in Atlanta.
This was the end of the Soviet era, the Eastern Bloc dominance of gymnastics.
For the first time, the former Soviet republics would be competing individually.
It was a question of what kind of impact that would have, and could the U.S. break through?
A few days before the opening ceremonies, the gymnasts arrived at the Georgia Dome to get familiar with the equipment they'd use in competition.
And also, judges are there.
The fans were there too.
Dominique Moceano's floor music was The Devil Went Down to Georgia. And when the first strains of that started, the place just erupted.
But that was nothing compared to what waited for the U.S. on the night of the team finals. Here's Shannon.
I mean, this audience was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. It was thunderous. It was incredible.
Dominique felt it too.
It was like an electricity I had never felt in an arena in my life. The crowd was just on their feet, just chanting and cheering, USA, USA, and the screams were just so loud.
Uneven Bars was our first event.
J.C. Phelps was the first up.
And she performed probably one of her best routines that she's ever done in her life. And so it was kind of like, okay, it's on. We got this. And the team just started out with a bang.
One by one, we were hitting, and sticking landings. And all of a sudden, it was like roaring every time somebody landed.
Before long, it was Dominique's turn.
You don't want to be the one to be like, oh, you don't want to hear the oh, you know? And so we were just like, all right, here it is.
We were just going out and doing our job.
That's gymnast Amy Chow.
We really didn't have any major mistakes on the next two events, so we went to beam and we went to floor.
The Soviet Union had won the team title at every Olympics they had participated in since 1952. And now, after 3 out of 4 rotations, the U.S. was ahead of the Russians by nearly a point. For the final rotation of the night, it would be the U.S. on vault, Russia on floor.
Vault goes fast because there's only one element. It takes, a matter of 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whereas a floor routine is about 90 seconds.
And vault scores are often higher than scores on floor.
You only have one element that you're taking deductions from, whereas with a floor exercise routine, you've got 8, 9, 10.
Right now, the Americans are making it almost impossible for Russia to catch. Like I said,
the U.S. was all but guaranteed the gold, but Shannon Miller didn't know that.
My coaches know that I don't want to know where the standings are, and they don't tell me.
Under the rules at the time, gymnasts got 2 attempts at the vault. Shannon landed both attempts.
I was finished. That was it. And now I could relax a little bit. I was able to look up at the leaderboard, saw we were in first place. It was incredible. I'm like doing math in my head. All right, we've got 2 great vaulters coming up.
Dominique Mucciano and Kerri Strug were the anchors, the last of the American gymnasts to go on vault.
Nancy Armour again.
They had built up enough of a score at that point that the Russians were not going to be able to catch them simply because the scores on vault are always higher. And I distinctly remember looking at the Russians on the floor, and you could tell that they knew, because Svetlana Khorkina, who would become the preeminent gymnast of the next 4 years, was just sobbing. She knew that the Russians were not going to win the gold medal.
But those of us watching on TV got a different message.
The Americans are vaulting for the gold medal, and they have got to pour it on here.
Dominique and Kerri didn't know that it was nearly impossible for the U.S. to lose. They didn't know that viewers at home were being told they needed to stick their landings for the team to win. But they did know one thing.
We all knew we could hit our vaults. It wasn't a hard thing to do. We had done it so many times.
So Dominique goes down the vault runway, everything looks good, and it just looks like she opened up a little bit and she just lands on her bottom. And we were like, oh, that's kind of actually super unusual, because she never misses that vault.
Something's a little off, but okay, she's got another one. Goes down again, misses again.
And I was like, whoa, that's so weird, because she never, ever does that.
It was heartbreaking to have my feet slip from under me when I knew I could nail that vault.
But Shannon wasn't worried, at least not yet.
Okay, no problem. We still got this. And yet you start doing a little bit more of that math, thinking, wait, okay, what do we actually need? And then Kerri goes up, and Kerri is such a strong vaulter.
And then Kerri goes, and she also kind of falls very similarly to Dominique.
And it was a little bit of that moment where your heart drops and you think, what's going on? And so I'm watching her walk back, and I think we all were, and just cheering her on. Kerri, you got this.
And you could see her kind of shaking her leg and her ankle and moving it around. And I'm like, something's up. Because I know Kerri, I trained with her. I know something's up with her ankle.
And she was still shaking it and kind of testing it. And that's when I think we all kind of started to worry.
There's very little time between the vaults, so it wasn't like she could come and be evaluated before she went again,
By this point, Dominique's score had already clinched the gold medal for the U.S. But NBC certainly didn't say that to those of us watching from home.
For the USA, she's the last to go. She's the only one who can do it.
And no one told Kerri either.
Kerri's not down there doing math to figure it out. I mean, in her mind, this is it, and she's going to do this for the team.
In recent years, some have said that allowing Kerri to do her second vault was abusive. The U.S. had won the gold. There was no need for Kerri to risk further injury. But Kerri doesn't see it that way.
She herself has said that she would have done anything to do that vault.
And so Kerri started down the runway for her second and final attempt.
And we all know what happens after that. You could see her arms go up.
And I was like, okay, good. She got on her feet, and then all of a sudden on the one foot, and then all of a sudden I see her go down.
She was on all fours, basically having to crawl off the mat. And it was like, oh my God, what happened to her?
And before you knew it, she's being carried off. And we were like, what happened?
You hate to say it, but it was, you knew watching it that it was going to be one of those moments that was going to be shown over and over again, that you were watching something that was going to be a seminal moment of these games.
Kerri had a severe sprain and 2 torn ligaments in her ankle. She'd end up being unable to compete in the individual events. Soon after the Olympics, she'd retire from competition. For Kerri's teammates, the next few minutes were chaotic.
people start yelling at you to get going, walk out, we're moving out of the arena, and it's very hectic. I mean, I think we kind of knew we won the gold medal, but it was kind of one of those things you're waving as you leave the arena, and you're not thinking about a gold medal, you're thinking about, is Kerri okay?
Backstage, the athletes finally had a chance to celebrate, but it didn't last for long.
They had us line up, and they wanted us to start marching out for the award ceremony, and yet our entire team wasn't there.
We didn't know where Kerri was, so we're like, wait a minute, where's Kerri? Like, where is she? We had no idea.
And at one point, we're getting sternly asked to get out on the floor because this is televised. We got TV time. We've got all kinds of things going on. And not one of us moved. And it was just that, I don't even think we said anything. It was just that understanding that we walk out as a team, period.
At just that moment, Kerri's coach, Bela Karolyi, came running out with Kerri in his arms. He got in line with the athletes and carried her to the medal stand.
At least we were a little bit relieved, like, oh, phew, she's going to be able to participate in this award ceremony because she should, you know.
But even as they received their gold medals, Shannon says it still didn't all sink in.
Too stunned, I think, in many ways, to grasp the meaning of what we had accomplished. And I think for me, it would take years, maybe a decade or so, before really understanding what that night meant, not only to us, but for those watching.
All this time, Dominique Moceanu was having a very different experience.
I wanted to cry, and I actually was crying right before I got up on the Olympic podium.
Before they walked out to receive their medals, a teammate noticed Dominique's tears.
And she's like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just feel everyone's disappointed in me because I couldn't hit my vaults. And she's like, we just won the gold. It's okay.
After the medal ceremony, the gymnasts were taken to a room where they could visit with their families.
My dad had already calculated the math. He was pretty good in math, actually, so he knew that my scores won. He told my Aunt Janice, he's like, she already won it. Like, they did it.
But Dominique's dad didn't tell her that.
I remember my dad's first words being, why did you fall? What happened? It took everything in me to not just break down right there in front of everybody again. I just remember it being just a little bit sad.
Looking back, Dominique measures her success by the things she's done after the Olympics. Coaching young athletes, standing up against abuses in our sport, joining the voices who say there's a better way. And there's something else that brings Dominique solace.
I will always know mathematically that my scores were enough. I don't have to carry that burden for the rest of my life.
A lot has come to light in recent years about abuses in gymnastics and the toll it takes on young athletes. More than a decade after the 96 Games, when she was married with a daughter of her own, Dominique Moceanu would be one of the first to speak out. But that's a story for another day. The night after that historic win, everyone wanted to get close to the Magnificent Seven.
It's chaos. Apparently, when you win an Olympic gold medal, you do not get to sleep that night.
The team got a police escort to Planet Hollywood. Two of the 90s biggest stars, power couple Demi Moore and Bruce Willis, were throwing a party.
We hadn't eaten since, lunchtime that day, and it was 10 o'clock at night. We were just like, where do we get food? Please set us down so we can order food.
At the time, Demi was filming G.I. Jane, a fictional story of the first woman to enter the U.S. Navy's Special Operations Training.
Like, this is G.I. Jane. She's amazing, and she had just buzzed all of her hair off.
The movie got a lukewarm reaction from critics, but it had at least one fan.
I don't even know how I was allowed to watch that. I don't think my parents knew, but I remember seeing it. I'm like, yes, this is badass.
Dominique remembers meeting the dream team and 7'1" Shaquille O'Neal.
They're like so tall, and I'm looking up. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're enormous. And We were just comparing shoe sizes. Shaq and I put our feet next to each other. It was like his foot was like gigantic and mine was like this little itty bitty thing.
At one point, Shaq picked her up like a barbell and lifted her over his head.
Shaq picked me up? Wow, how many people get to say that?
It was a great night and wonderful, but I kind of wanted to get to bed because I needed to train the next day. And then I was competing in the all-around a couple days later. And then I had vault finals, and then I had balance beam finals. So it was one of those where you can't just kind of let your hair down and party. I needed to get rest and get ready for the next 3 competitions.
The Olympic schedule is tough for a lot of athletes.
It's a tight turn for soccer players with how many games and how many days rest. You don't have many days rest.
Julie Foudy says whenever the soccer players had downtime, they'd turn on their TVs and watch the other women's teams.
I literally remember just planting ourselves in a horizontal position on a couch, on a bed, anything, and we would just watch the games. And we would get this raw feed into our dorm or our room.
You know, that closed circuit, you know, you're watching it literally without commercials.
That's goalkeeper Brianna Scurry.
It was important that even if they didn't know we were watching, that they would feel that we were watching, because we knew they were watching us too.
What you quickly realized is, oh my gosh, women are crushing it for the United States in this Olympics.
Every time Julie saw the softball team or the basketball team or the gymnastics team on the TV, she had the same reaction.
Oh my gosh, look at us. Look at us go. It was these Title IX babies coming through saying, yeah, thank you. We're here, and this is why we're going to be so dominant, not just in this Olympics, but think about all the Olympics to come. Look out.
Coming up on Summer of Gold, those winning ways continue.
There was never a moment when I felt like we weren't going to win.
There is nothing, like nothing. Nothing will separate us from having more points than Brazil at the end of this game.
It just kept growing and growing, and more media in the media tent and more attention.
And you only get so many of these moments. And as female athletes, this is what you get the most, right? Those windows are finite and they're super small and they're fast. They come and they go. And you've got to really make sure that you maximize that exposure.
Summer of Gold is a Dear Media and Together production. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual violence, help is available 24/7 through the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit the website online.rainn.org. If you like our show, please give us a 5-star rating and review. And don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. We've got a Spotify playlist with tons of our favorite songs from the 90s. You can find a link in the show notes, so make sure you check it out. Summer of Gold is hosted by me, Michelle Kwan. It's written and reported by Karen Given. Producer is Asil Kibbe. Fact-checking by Emily Ann Vaughn. Production assistance by Daniel Gonzalez. Tina Toby Mack is our sound designer and mix engineer. Original music by Andrew Epen. Executive producers are Alex Morgan, Sue Bird, and Jessica Robertson from Together, along with Jocelyn Falk from Dear Media and Jeff Berman on behalf of both Dear Media and Together. Michael Bostic is the founder and CEO of Dear Media.